News breaking in this hour. As the ANC braces itself for a special NEC to discuss corruption, former President Jacob Zuma has rubbished President Ramaphosa's letter to party members. Former President Jacob Zuma has hit out against his successor, Cyril Ramaphosa. Zuma says Ramaphosa's letter to ANC members last weekend is fundamentally flawed in many aspects. The former president also says that the letter by President Ramaphosa lacks a basic understanding of how leadership of the ANC communicates. Zuma also says Ramaphosa pays lip service to the 54th National Conference, such as nationalisation of the Reserve Bank, land expropriation, and radical economic transformation. For more on this now, let us speak to our SABC News political reporter, Samkele Maseko. Samkele, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the SABC News channel. So you have the former president basically saying that he has decided to take an unusual decision to respond to President Ramaphosa's letter.
Indeed. Essentially what you are looking at here is a Thabo Mbeki replay or reloaded. For instance, you'd remember when former President Jacob Zuma took over the reins of the African National Congress. In that particular election in 2009, on the eve of those elections, Zuma had said that former President Mbeki would campaign for the African National Congress. Mbeki came out to the fore and said that there is no such. He never committed to campaigning for the African National Congress. It's an open secret that former President Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa have been on the opposite sides of the political divide. You've seen now with President Ramaphosa pinning that letter to the African National Congress members. We go back to his campaign going towards the 2017 elective conference. I remember particularly the Utenek rally that he addressed of the South African Communist Party, where he was alongside SABC Jonas, where he eventually launched his campaign to contest for the ANC presidency. Ramaphosa spoke about the sins of incumbency that had engulfed the governing party and how monies had been flowing around, how the ANC had been perceived as the most corrupt organization to lead this particular country. Ramaphosa speaking profusely against the sins of incumbency that were taking place in the era of former President Jacob Zuma. Now Jacob Zuma has come out to the fore and basically said that the current president of the ANC essentially does not understand how the leadership role of the African National Congress is purported, saying that the letter that he issued out last week is fundamentally flawed and lacks a basic understanding of ANC leadership and how it communicates to its members, essentially saying that the president doesn't even understand the own organization that he leads. Mind you, that Jacob Zuma was Secretary General of the African National Congress in 1991 in their first inaugural conference at the Durban Westville campus, where Jacob Zuma was elected as Deputy Secretary General. They've been in the leadership structures of the African National Congress together since the dawn of our democracy, or since the unbanning for the first conference of the African National Congress, if one may put it like that, when it was unbanned and officially allowed back to be a political formation in the country. I'll go to this particular segment here, which reads, quote, Mr. President, your letter further pays lip service to the resolutions of the ANC's 54th National Conference. In actual fact, our movement under your leadership has been avoiding implementing resolutions on land expropriation, nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank, radical economic transformation, free higher education, job creation, poverty eradication, just to mention a few. Hard-hitting, where the former president of the African National Congress essentially says that the ANC, under the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa, has lost track and has veered off it's the mission that it basically resolved upon in the 54th National Conference in December, where Cyril Ramaphosa won against Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Finding a way that history has a way of repeating itself.
And part of the letter, Samkele, reads that, I know, Mr. President, my letter will be misconstrued as an attempt to ignore the allegations that have been leveled against me or to attribute every failure of the ANC to you. What exactly are we reading? Are we seeing internal politics playing out now in the public?
What we are seeing is essentially the gloves are off. We are essentially seeing a launch of two campaigns. One, the campaign that seeks to be anti-Cyril Ramaphosa, that has been there since his election in Nasrec, a campaign that seeks to unseat Cyril Ramaphosa, a campaign that seeks to undermine him as the president of the African National Congress, portray him as an individual who doesn't know how the ANC operates as an organization, seems to perceive him as a person who doesn't know the ANC's organizational processes. It seeks to portray him as someone who pays lip service to the conference resolutions of the African National Congress, seeks to show him as a person who's serving the interest of what they perceive in the divides of the African National Congress as white monopoly capital as opposed to monopoly capital. It all goes back to that interview we had with the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Ace Makashule, saying that there is white monopoly capital in the country, despite the ANC conference resolution saying that in South Africa we have monopoly capital, which is in this instance characterized as white, showing the two different interpretations of the economic characterization of the economic landscape in the country by the two warring factions in the ANC. It essentially also lays a launching pad, or is the foundation of what will happen in the Special National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, which was meant to get underway 34 minutes ago at about 3 o'clock. The special NEC of the ANC was meant to start. I'm not sure if it has yet started, but it essentially lays the ground for that. But let me just read one other extract from this particular letter that comes from former President Zuma. Quote, "Mr. President, I plead with you and the entire NEC of our movement to reflect on the issues I have raised, including the issue of corruption. I implore you to take responsibility without insulting our movement and its members. You have committed no crime of corruption. We have committed no crime of commission. Rather, we have committed no crime of corruption as they sit waiting for the ever elusive better life for all." Essentially, he goes on to say, Mr. President, I hope that the letter received constructive written. I hope that our structures will get the opportunity to discuss the issues I raised. I have no claim that there is only challenges facing our movement or possesses the elusive wisdom to suggest that they should be dealt with. I am merely making a plea to our movement and our leaders to honestly confront the challenges that faces our movement and our people. And he goes on to essentially say that he's not trying to attack President Cyril Ramaphosa and the president of the ANC. Instead of saying that the ANC is a corrupt organization, he must speak to particular individuals and not paint every single member of the African National Congress and saying the ANC is tainted with issues of corruption, which essentially means that every member of the African National Congress, last they checked, there are about 780 audited members at the National General Council of the African National Congress in 2015. I'm not sure where the membership sits now, but essentially Jacob Zuma is saying that the current president of the African National Congress is saying all members of the African National Congress are corrupt.
All right, so Samkele, you say that gloves are off now, I beg your pardon. And what is likely to happen? Is it likely to get dirtier within the ANC? I mean, we have this letter by the former President Jacob Zuma. Andile Lungisa recently penned a letter to the president himself. The Integrity Commission, we've heard of that letter, and we had Pule Mabi saying that the SG has not received that letter. ANC in KwaZulu-Natal now backtracking on its decision to redeploy Zandile Gumede to the provincial legislature. Is it going to get more interesting?
Let us just first clarify this issue of ANC KZN backtracking on the issue of the deployment of Zandile Gumede. They are not backtracking. Zandile Gumede still remains a member of the provincial legislature in KwaZulu-Natal, and she will not resign. That's the communication I've had with the officials of the ANC in the province. They are essentially saying Zandile Gumede must step aside from all her responsibilities within the African National Congress as an RTT member in the eThekwini region, and step aside as well as a member of the provincial legislature in KwaZulu-Natal and a member of the portfolio committee in that province of cooperative governance and traditional affairs. She's essentially taking a leave of absence from the legislature, but she will still receive her annual salary of 1.1 million rands in the provincial legislature. She's still a member of the legislature. But all of this is a preemptive strike by the ANC PEC in KwaZulu-Natal, going into this NEC of the African National Congress, which has already started, which will speak on the issues of corruption allegations facing members of the African National Congress, and will essentially pin and implicate the likes of the portfolio committee chairperson of Home Affairs, Bongani Bongo, who is also charged for the bribe he tried to do with Advocate Vanara in that ESCOM inquiry in the 5th administration or 5th parliament, which essentially means that with KwaZulu-Natal also putting Zandile Gumede stepping aside and Michael Mabuya Kulu stepping aside as well, it essentially plays and lays a foundation for what may happen in the discussions that will take place in the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, in saying all of those who have been criminally charged must step aside. And this is in line with the 54th National Conference resolutions of the African National Congress in saying that all members of the party who are implicated and charged on issues of corruption must submit themselves to the Integrity Commission. Subsequently, the ANC will disassociate itself with anyone who is charged with issues of bribery, corruption, money laundering, malfeasance, and fraud. That is the conference resolution of the African National Congress, and that is what the KZN-PEC was simply implementing in their interpretation of the conference resolutions of the 54th National Conference, which basically means the NEC will have to go in the same precedent that has been set by the PEC of KwaZulu-Natal. But what we are seeing is a battle for the soul of the African National Congress between the two warring factions of Ace Magashule and Cyril Ramaphosa. You can no longer characterize that particular core that went into the conference of the ANC supporting Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as the MDZ faction. It has essentially now been taken over by the Secretary General of the African National Congress. That would be Elias Sikhobela Magashule versus Cyril Ramaphosa, the president. That is the two factions that are there and warring in the NEC. Then you've got one faction that is simply sitting on the fence and watching them, which is a core that is seemingly led by the Treasurer General Paul Mashatile and the Deputy President D.D. Mabuza. But it does seem as if the gloves are off going into this NEC that has already started.
All right, so I suppose we wait and what comes out of that NEC meeting. Samkele, thank you so much for coming through. SABC News political reporter there, Samkele Maseko, joining us live from Johannesburg.